Welcome to Middle Tennessee State University. I'm Virginia Tehrani. I'm with Tehrani Law, LLC, because you never need a lawyer till you do. Today, I am back at MTSU, my alma mater, with my absolute favorite professor, Dr. John Weil.
Good to be here.
Glad to have you here, though. I guess I'm here with you versus you being with me.
You are. It's very common, our alumni come from all over the country to visit me.
Well, they should. In fairness for everybody, Dr. Weil is actually my dad, too. So I'm really thrilled to be here. And truthfully, he was not only my dad, but my college professor, my coach for mock trial, the chairman of the political science department, and my advisor. So all of these things, and I have to credit him.
You didn't have a chance, did you?
No, I never had a chance. For whatever it's worth, I owe a lot to my dad for who I am and what I do now. So I am really glad that you let me come back and visit you here.
Good to be here.
Okay, so I want to introduce you. What we're doing with Tehrani Law is we're going to use Dr. Weil, not just as my dad, but as an expert subject matter consultant for the Law Unscripted. What we're going to do is we're going to bring him in a lot on specific types of law and Constitution especially, because he is a subject matter expert in the Constitution, the Supreme Court, and the amending process. Is that correct?
I think that's fair.
Okay. What other subjects do you feel like you have a little bit more expertise in?
One of my recent interests is American symbols. So I've done books on the U.S. flag, Declaration of Independence, the national anthem, Liberty Bell.
That's right, and Eagles.
And Eagles, that's my most recent in that genre. And I'm also quite interested in the intersection of politics and religion. So I have a book out called The Bible and American Law and Politics. I have another in Prayer in American Public Life, and I'm hoping to publish one eventually on the cross as a symbol in American life.
Okay, and we have at least one of those books with us.
I think you do, yes.
Yeah, let's see.
Probably at the bottom, right.
There we go. We've got a pile, but for good reason. So we have the Bible in American Law and Politics, and this is the one you said was more recent.
It's fairly recent, and God bless my editor. It started out as like 150,000 words and ended up as about 325,000 words. And somehow we got it into one volume.
Nice. And you actually write not just one book, but how many do you think you've actually written by now?
Probably about 25, and then probably edited another 25 or 30. I'm not sure.
How long have you been writing?
My first book was published in 1991. And since
which
then,
do you think that was? Do you remember which one was first?
I do. Well, yes. Had something to do with the amending process, but I don't remember the specific title. I've written about 5 or 6 books on the constitutional amending process. If we're doing show and tell, the most well-known of those is the book, the Encyclopedia, the third volume down. No, the other
this one. Okay.
It's actually a 2-volume work, and it deals with all the amendments that have been adopted, which are only 27, but it also deals with all the issues surrounding the amending process, and then the 12,000 odd amendments that have been proposed. Fortunately, many are on the same subject, so you might have 900 equal rights proposals. You might have 500 or 600 prayer and school proposals, but I've tried to group them all into categories and then do them in a sort of an ABC format.
Okay, and this one, so this 2-volume set is officially the Encyclopedia of Constitutional Amendments, Proposed Amendments, and Amending Issues from 1789 to 2015?
Yes, now that's my 4th edition.
Okay.
The 5th edition is at the printer, so there should be a revised edition, probably 2023.
And one of the first books I remember as a child growing up is something called, I think, Rewriting the Constitution.
Yes, that may have been the first, actually. That's good.
I may have gotten it.
I think you did. I think the very first book that I did, not only interested in amendments, but I'm interested in people who have proposed whole new constitutions or radical revisions of the Constitution. And that was, I think, my first book. And it was subsequently expanded into another book that we don't have here. And I think at the time we had something like 175 proposals that I had found that significantly would have revised the Constitution. And again, the new edition of the constitutional amendments and proposed amendments will have some that I've found since the publication of that book as well.
And how many have been adopted? Of all those hundreds that you found, how many have actually been adopted?
Well, 27 amendments, but that's even a little deceptive because the first 10 amendments, which we usually call the Bill of Rights, were adopted early on, 1791 as a group. There had actually been 12 of them proposed, 10 of which were ratified by the states.
And you've actually, in addition to all of these things, I believe you've actually written about the Constitutional Convention that proposed the Constitution and the Bill of Rights.
I have a 2-volume book called The Constitutional Convention of 1787. It's in a revised edition or second edition. And it again, like the other book, is sort of written in encyclopedic format with an A to Z. And I have essays on each of the delegates to the convention, each of the compromises, major issues that came up and debates there. And in some ways, it's maybe one of my favorite books because I believe the Founding Fathers were at least as wise and probably wiser than we are on governmental matters. And, you know, when the Federalist Papers were written, which were a series of articles that later appeared as a book to justify ratification of the Constitution, Alexander Hamilton, who is not as dear to me as James Madison, who was one of the other contributors, said that, you know, the United States, we were to determine whether a government could be based on reason and deliberation or whether it would be a matter of force. And, you know, the whole idea of constitutionalism is the idea of the rule of law, the idea that no one man or even one branch of government would be predominant, but that they would keep, by separating powers, they would keep checks and balances that would preserve our liberties.
Okay, I'm going to throw you a more recent, maybe controversial question.
Okay.
Do you think we've preserved those checks and balances?
By and large, I think we have. You'll find periods where Congress perhaps has dominated more than it should, or the presidency. You know, there was a period, particularly during the Vietnam War era, where people were referring to the imperial presidency. I think President Trump had fairly imperial ideas of his power, but I think you see after the congressional investigations and whatever, I think you see something of a balance being restored.
Now, with all of this, with all of your tremendous knowledge about the Founding Fathers, the presidents, the Constitution, the amending process, what did you actually teach on?
Well, mostly, you've already mentioned that I was a mock trial coach for 25 years, and I guess in terms of what I enjoyed the most, I enjoyed that a lot. Got to meet students in a closer way than probably you would in the classroom. But my primary classes that I taught were American government and then 2 semesters of constitutional law. And, you know, that interest has led me to books both on the Constitution and on the Supreme Court. Both of which I think you have over to your stage right.
Stage right. And I wish that I had this book when I was taking your constitutional law classes, because you've written, now this is the 18th edition, the Essential Supreme Court Decisions, summaries of all of the leading cases.
Now, I got a confession to make here.
Oh, do tell me.
I have only done the last 5 editions.
Okay.
And in fact, contrary to the way you feel, when I first started teaching constitutional law, there was a little book by Bartholomew and Menez, which was much smaller than that. But I always hated it because my students, when I asked them to turn in briefs, would simply go to that and write out the briefs. But when they passed away, it had been out of print for 10 years or so, and I was asked to renew it. And so I've done, I believe, this is probably the fifth edition that I've actually done on my own.
That you've handled.
Right, that I have handled. And, they're usually about, well, this one I think was 22, so but even since it was published, we've had the Dobbs.
That's this year.
Yeah, we've had the Dobbs decision related to abortion, and there's been another couple of it. Usually I'll try to get, I think this went through the end of the 21-22 session. I think that's right. Well, in any event, it doesn't have Dobbs, and it doesn't have a few of those that were decided at the end of the last term. And then I also do a book which I use, no, the other one.
This one.
Yeah, which I use as a supplement to some of my courses. This is sort of a companion to the U.S. Constitution and its amendment, and it's basically just simply a catalog of, well, it does some introductory chapters, and then I go basically line by line, clause by clause through the Constitution and explain, what the interpretations of that clause have been, and particularly what the court decisions have been written in regard to it.
Oh. And this is really why you are being consulted even on the Nashville news. Is that right?
Well, I suppose that's...
you're a correspondent, right?
I don't have an official position, but if somebody calls, I like to answer, yes. For the most part, I enjoy being on the media. They're not always quite as hot as this interview.
Yeah, I'm afraid we're toasting ourselves a little bit with the fireplace. We thought it would be nice and cozy, but it is a little toasty as well. Okay, so the other thing that I really like is you really know the amendments themselves. Like you said, the Bill of Rights. And I know you've written on the First Amendment and the Fourth Amendment
have
in particular.
encyclopedias on both of those, right?
And so this is the encyclopedia on the First Amendment.
Right, but now let me clarify that because I don't want to take too much credit. I had two co-authors.
Okay.
One is a local attorney, David Hudson, and the other is an attorney and professor at Hamline University, David Schultz. And it was published originally by CQ Press, if I remember. I don't know if it's CQ
please.
CQ, I think, is now part of Sage Publishing. But in any event, several years ago, we have a First Amendment Center here at MTSU. Ken Paulson, who's an attorney and one-time founder, editor of USA Today, for a while was dean of our College of Media and Entertainment, and he purchased the rights from CQ, and one can now go for free to the First Amendment Encyclopedia. It's at MTSU, and there's well over 1,000, probably over 2,000 by now, articles on the First Amendment. And that's
basically sponsored by or related to this book.
That's right. In other words, what we did is we took the book and then we revised them, and then we constantly update, mostly looking at Supreme Court decisions, but also, other controversies that come up related to the First Amendment. And you know this, I'm sure, but the First Amendment actually has 5 different provisions. 2 relate to religion. One is a prohibiting of an establishment of religion. The other is a free exercise clause. And then there's also the right of speech, press, assembly, and petition. So I think that may have come to 6, did it? It depends on, right.
I think so, but I'm glad you just quoted those off and not me.
Well, again, the first 2 both deal with religion. So sometimes they're grouped together as one, but essentially they're the provisions. And so it covers a lot of territory. Speech and religion get far more attention generally than assembly and petition. But in large part, I think, because those last rights they can become controversial. It is the right of peaceable assembly, not the right to riot. And none of the provisions in the First Amendment are absolute, but some of them come pretty close to it. But there's always room for interpretation, and there's often there'll be conflict between perceived rights in the First Amendment and let's say the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment, or between other constitutional provisions. And in our system, for the most part, the Supreme Court acts as a mediator in most of those disputes.
Thank you very much for your
You're
help,
welcome.
your service, and everything that you have done for your students.
Thank you.